When you invited the teacher unions in and told them this is what you had in mind, what was the reaction?
We never invited them in and told them anything. When they read our final report, to my dismay, there was an awful lot of what I thought was knee-jerk conservative opposition from some of the teachers' federations. I thought they'd appreciate how much we appreciated them and their mates, and instead of that, they obstinately became opponents, and I thought it was a foolish position, and they wasted a lot of their own currency.
Rhonda, is that a fair analysis?
Well, I think if we're looking at what the Royal Commission was recommending, it was talking about mandatory professional development. On the one hand, it was saying teachers are our heroes, and those were welcome words to people out in schools across the province. But on the next hand, it was saying, but you must do this, 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 and this, and these are all of the areas that you must improve. And in fact, teachers were doing professional development then. They are continuing to do professional development now. And every time we as an organization offer a professional development conference or training, it's oversubscribed. We have never found that there isn't the interest or the desire to grow professionally and to develop and improve. But very often the kinds of opportunities that they might want to do that aren't available. And in fact, what we saw over the last government with its implementation of mandatory professional development was a reduction in the number of professional development days and opportunities, less training provided directly by school boards and the ministry, and less money available for those kinds of things.
He's saying that not just your union, but I presume all the unions involved had a kind of a knee-jerk, negative, conservative reaction to what he was suggesting. Is that accurate?
Well, I think there was a lot of concern that all of the buzzwords around accountability would be misused and interpreted and implemented in ways that weren't in the best interest, really, of education or teachers, and that's what we saw over 8 years of the Tory government and the kinds of comments that Mr. Kaplan started with. So I think some of those fears probably were not entirely unfounded.
You did, I mean, not you personally. There was opposition to the concept of recertification. There was opposition to the College of Teachers. I remember the first couple of meetings that I had with your predecessors, right from the beginning, before anybody even thought the Conservatives were going to get elected, because everybody thought these guys were going to get elected.
Right.
So it was a knee-jerk reaction. In fact, I remember meeting with union leaders and them saying, we will support the College of Teachers under the following condition. You turn it over to the Ontario Federation of Teachers. And I said, not in your life. And the mandatory recertification had nothing when we announced it. We gave it over to what was going to be the College of Teachers. We said, no test.
Can I just ask you,
mandatory recertification.
Can I just ask you this? The doctors run the College of Physicians and Surgeons. The lawyers run the Law Society of Upper Canada. What would be wrong with the teachers running the College of Teachers?
Well, the teachers are running the College of Teachers.
No.
I didn't say the teachers running the College of Teachers. I said the union leaders said they wanted the Ontario Federation of Teachers running the College of Teachers, which is quite different. And there was a very...
We argued that the college should only have a certain number of seats,
but not run it.
But not run it.
What was your concern about them running it?
Because schools are part of the community. I mean, we had certain themes that continued through, and if you were a community organization, the community had the right to have some kind of input.
Teachers have the majority right now. Teachers have the majority.
Let's be clear, though, that this thing, we're focusing a lot on teachers here, but what the College of Teachers is today and what it should be, and hopefully will be in the future, and what the professional learning program and the performance appraisal system and everything else that was designed by the previous government was designed based on a model that was working. The Regulated Health Professions Act, 24 health professions, doctors, dentists, nurses, midwives, dietitians, absolutely. And it was based on research. That was the program that was brought in. It reflected what the Royal Commission recommended. And what was really of concern is that an OSTF, with all due respect to Rhonda, led the charge on this. It was just no. And that, I think, was very, very unfortunate.
I mean,
now, I'd like to get into this with this observation. If, on the broader question, if I'm a parent, and one of the concerns I'm going to have, and this is maybe a question for Rhonda, given the recommendations, which I thought were quite reasonable, if I'm a parent and I have a son or daughter in grade 10, I'd like to know that the person teaching my son or daughter science has now or soon will get a reasonable concentration of related experience in science education. And that's what I think really frustrated a lot of parents. They said, you know, Conway's there and he's teaching X and he is absolutely unconnected from that area of specialization. Now, we'd like to think, we know it's a big system and you've got to move people around, but surely it's not too much to ask of public education within a reasonable framework and with all due respect to professional, you know, the allocation of professionals, that over a period of time, that if you're going to teach history, you're going to teach math, you're going to teach chemistry, that you have now or soon acquire through supportive professional or other development mechanisms, the requisite qualifications. And the public looked at this.
Okay, let's give Rhonda a chance.
The Education Act, frankly, deals with what kinds of requirements are necessary for teachers to teach in various subject disciplines. Those things are all dealt with through the ministry. The college, if we get back to the college,
Come on,
teachers were not...
Fair, though. That's not fair, though, because there's schools all through Ontario where we have teachers that do not have the qualifications. The Education Act allows people to teach in the areas that they're qualified and certified, and it allows some latitude in the intermediate grades. But that has nothing to do with the college.
But Rhonda,
that has to do with staffing schools in small rural areas and so on, where you may not be able to hire a teacher for one section of physics.
It has everything to do with it has everything to do with results.
They're unrelated
It has
issues.
everything to do with results, and we know this. I think all of the research indicates that one of the key determinants of a good educational result is not just the motivation of the teacher in science and math particularly, but what kind of qualifications does that man or woman have to teach that subject. And
Coming
I think
out of
that's
university with the qualifications that I had to go into a school, before the college was ever put in place, those were the qualifications I needed to go in and teach those subjects. After the college is there, nothing has changed.
Okay, but Rhonda, I think hang on one
issues.
second. Let me get this question on the record, because I think many parents were championing this recommendation because they thought there's no way to get rid of a bad teacher right now. Were they right to think that?
If there's a teacher who's not performing, if there's a teacher who's had some sort of misconduct, there has always been an avenue for the school board to discipline and deal with that teacher. Before the college was put in place, there were disciplinary panels through the Ontario Teachers Federation, and they would recommend to the minister that the license be revoked. And in fact, in the last years that the OTF had that responsibility as a professional body, it revoked as many certificates, really, as the college has every year since.
I have to tell you,
but we're not...
I have to tell you that it's your show, but you're distorting the importance of the last 10 years. The federations have been a very small issue, and the problem of teachers who couldn't get fired are a tiny issue. They always are. The real story of the 8 of the 9 years, or 9 of the last 10 years, was the demonization of the teachers by the government, which everybody understood was happening. There were more strikes in those first 4 or 5 years of the Harris government than in the entire 50 years before it.
They actually used your recommendations.
No, they absolutely did not. They used means to destroy ends. And the teachers, instead of being excited and involved and part of the community, were increasingly demoralized, they were increasingly upset, they were increasingly distressed, and everybody knew this was happening. They knew it was happening.
That's debatable.
What's debatable?
I tend to agree that there was a lot more conflict than there needed to be. But now we're at a position in Ontario where we are actually again looking at the College of Teachers. The current government is re-examining this recommendation, and the current minister is leaning heavily towards going in the direction that the teachers' unions want, and that is to give the teachers' unions control of the college. Well,
to give teachers control of the college.
No, I'm afraid
we have a minority of teachers on the college.
That is a complete misleading of the information. The fact is, you have 13, if I recall, that are members of the federations, and then you have directors of education, principals, and people from faculties. Let me finish just for a second. Faculties of education. Teachers make the majority of the college up. If you gave over, I mean, look, at the first council, you had Liz Barkley on, your predecessor. You put her on as one of your classroom teachers. She hadn't been in a classroom, and I might say that was good for students, for many, many years.
But what's your point about why the Liberals are watering it down?
Well, I think that they're watering it down because this was a position that they took before the election, and it's a commitment that the current minister has made, and quite frankly, if he does this, I hope he's backing off. If he does it, it will ruin the College of Teachers. It will turn it in. They already have caucus meetings for the union reps on the council. They will control the governing council for the College of Teachers, and it will mean that it will be turned into basically a union function.
But a cautionary tale I would offer on public education 2005. You've now got a very different public out there. You've got a lot of you know, baby boomers and people not quite of the baby boom who've got a very different view of what they expect as the, you know, offered change. And, you know, when I was first elected in 1975, there was very little thought about, you know, there being much of an alternative to public schools. And that was the way it was for most of my public life from 1975 till I left in 2003. But in the last few years of my public life, I really started to sense that there were a lot of people who felt, listen, we believe in public education, but we want a responsive public education, and if we don't get it, if we don't, if the major players, whether they're the politicians, the teachers, or business and labor leaders, if they're not going to respond to us, we will make an alternative.
I've got to jump in. Forgive me, Jerry. I've got to jump in because we're down to our last 2.5 minutes, and I want to ask the sort of all-encompassing key question here, which is, you did this 10 years ago. Yeah. If you are a 10-year-old child in Ontario today, what are you in, grade 5? If you're 10 years old, you're in grade 5. How much better is the education system that 10-year-old in grade 5, how much better is it today than it was before you started all this? I'm going to give you the last word, Jerry. Start Sean Conway, 30 seconds each.
Well, I think the biggest single changes are around the curriculum, and I think overall they're positive.
Dave Cook?
I would agree with Sean. I think the curriculum changes and the accountability structure that's been built in around it have improved the system.
So this grade 5 kid is better off today than he would have been 10 years ago had this commission not happened.
I believe so, yes.
Janet?
I agree with that. I think the Royal Commission set us on a path of education reform in this province that is good for kids, good for education, and hopefully will be good for our society in the future.
I see a Liberal, a New Democrat, and a Conservative all agreeing here. This thing seemed to have achieved some kind of consensus at the end of the day.
Well, there was, if you remember, a high degree of support for the essential ingredients of the report. But it's about program, and I think on curriculum, I think we are better off, and I think there are graduates. I met over Christmas. I had some very interesting anecdotal evidence. Young people from Ontario actually going to university in Western and Eastern Canada telling me that they felt those curriculum changes were very beneficial.
Rhonda?
I think that student is still being served by a dedicated teacher as they were 10 years ago. I think their teachers are still continuing to learn and grow as professionals, and I think that the greatest struggles that some of those students might be facing is we are still catching up from years of underfunding, which has nothing to do with the Royal Commission in Ontario, but unfortunately I think has made some very detrimental effects over the last several years in the education system that we're still correcting.
Jerry, you got the last minute.
I'm far more with Rhonda than with this consensus of the political parties, I guess all of whom are buying into the same establishment. I thought that most of the spirit of our report was completely trounced by the government that came in after the NDP was defeated. I thought even though they kept implementing a number of the structures, like the College of Teachers, that it was done for all the wrong reasons and was implemented badly. I thought they demoralized and set the system back in many ways. I thought the curriculum, while it might have been advanced, was not ready to be taught by most of the teachers who were never prepared for it properly. And I'd say many 5-year-olds, especially those that you weren't talking about, Sean, the multicultural 5-year-olds who make, 10-year-olds who make up 40% of the entire province of Ontario, are hanging on by a thread. I hope that the government that's now in power starts to redress the balance of what was hurt by the government.
That's Jerry Kaplan, former co-chair of the Royal Commission on Learning. Thanks so much for being here today, Jerry. To you three as well, former education ministers, and to Rhonda, we appreciate your being here as well. And so goes another week of Studio 2. I'm Steve Paikin. Hope you'll join Paula and me back here Monday at 8. Have a good weekend, everybody, and we'll see you then.